Good evening, all. Um, Gilad and I have been having some conversations about wartime conversations about some of some of the changes effects this war has have is having on Israel and uh, different conditions that led up to this war, social unrest, religious unrest, a lot of topics, and unfortunately, I wasn't available to have some of these. Hello, sir.
Hello.
It's been a while.
It has.
How have you been?
Um, no, it's a weird situation. I mean, somehow like routine creeps in, but around us the fire still burns. So
Yeah,
it's
it's sucks that it's been like it's going to move into its fourth month, and then you're just living through war, right?
yeah, that's the situation.
I guess what would really I don't know if this is the right term, but exemplifies this situation is the child that went into captivity, 9 months old, and had his birthday in captivity. So, look, thank God, kids are resilient. Assuming the child is alive, please God, but kids are resilient, and seemingly he could forget such trauma at his age. But the fact that he is, his first year birthday was in captivity is pretty bananas.
Yeah, definitely horrible to try and imagine such a situation on anyone, on yourself or anyone close to you. And in a way, I think as hard as it is, it's kind of the uh, moral thing to do, right? To see those people as though they could have been as close to you as one could imagine.
Yeah, and hence, I mean, that's why also we increasingly are having tensions in Israel with regards to um, call them the two goals of the war, so to speak. Those are general terms, but destroying Hamas, whatever that means, and bringing home the hostages. And obviously, we have to be very sensitive to the sounds we're hearing from the parents of said captives and the siblings of said captives. So, yeah, it's a horrible position to be in right now. Um, I before we get a little, I mean, and you could decide that you rather not talk about this. But before we get deeper into this topic, how are you? How's your work, your scientific mind, your music mind? Like,
Well, if we don't live, then all that's left is to die, right? So the work is work is going. Like I said, routine settled in. We'll have my band will have a show um, on next Wednesday in Tel Aviv. Yeah. Um,
I don't know if
so
that dates me. Is that still a sign people
no,
do?
it's still like this. Like
Okay, right.
both of them
Beavis and
are
Butthead,
still.
he could be rocking on. Okay, good, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, those are still very much alive. At least in my scene, I might be the dinosaur playing
Rock
that
and roll.
that kind of music, but I mean, you make the art
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
that resonates with you.
So
um,
so music's going well, okay, or moving.
going well is, let's say, an exaggeration, but like it's reached the point where, yeah, you got, like, if we don't start doing it, then that's just too hard to sort of get through this period, right? Like
Do
it's
you
it.
Sorry, do you mind if I just ask? Because I remember you mentioning to me that it was like a while since you guys like got together or practiced. So, what was that first jam like getting back? Like, was there a sense of emotion being like, coming out in the music? And if that's too private, like you don't have to share, but I would just be interested.
Um, for sure. There's a lot that goes into it, right? Because we've been playing together for so long. But there's, I guess, a sort of combination of those things. I think in the show it would probably be a much more dramatic thing because the rehearsal there's a lot of just sort of rust and a lot of the sort of uh, routine things that you do, right? Like you kind of you play your songs, you figure out what's better or worse, and everyone's a bit rusty, and like that sort of eases you in. But I think playing a show live is definitely going to be something. I haven't done that since the war started, and it's um, it's pretty intense anyway. So
Okay, cool. And what about work?
well, uh, experimental quantum physics is never something that uh, you get easy results in. So, I mean, there's some nice stuff going on. Some components that arrived, some setups that we are managing to sort of push forward. But it's both a really hard field and also the lab is new. So like I'm with staff member who's building a new lab. So I'm at the um, right framework level, like building the all of the bits and pieces. Whereas my master's degree was in a lab that was long standing and everything was already quite solid. So a lot of it is kind of um, very tedious. Sometimes feels very Sisyphic because like you do something and then you have to start all over again like 20 times before anything works. But I still love it. Right? If you don't love physics, you don't do physics. But you can make money elsewhere. Right? So
Well, I hope. I mean, first of all, I'm glad that you love it, and second of all, our all hopes are on you, right? To getting us, figuring things out at the deepest
in a
level.
way, I mean, that's a whole different subject. But
No,
I
I
think
understand. We don't have to go into that right now, but yeah.
yeah, I'll
Um,
just say in a few words that I think it's a lot more about trying to dig into something that's beautiful and cool. At least when you're doing fundamental research, like this is if it ever gets to technology, that's at least 50 years from now, right? Like it's not none of this is
well,
going.
I mean, yes and no. Yes, at this rate, and then there's exponentials that 50 years could really happen in 20 years if they find out like one thing. So you've got to keep on pushing.
Sure, but I'm just saying, like, it depends what you're doing. If you're doing fundamental research, then that's generally speaking not something that anyone can say. Like, if anyone asks me, okay, so what's this practically do? Are you going to find a cure for cancer? It's like, no, none of that. And then like you can look back and say, well, what Einstein did made us have like all of these amazing things, but definitely not in 1905, right? Like nowhere near 1905.
That's true, but like knowing now what we know, knowing now how beneficial his theories were. Do you feel like from that fundamental level, you're playing around with like, are you Prometheus right now? Are you playing around with something that you're going to end up bringing us fire, or you're saying like, it's not even like, don't even hold your breath.
Well, I think it's like in most things in life, and I'm not saying this in any sort of false modesty. You kind of realize when that 1% of the people do 99% of the work, and 99% of people do 1% of the work. And at least for me, coming to physics, I realized I'm on the second group, right? Like, and I'm fine with it because I want to be a part of this project. And I think I'm going to do some cool things, and maybe they'll be published in a high impact journal, and that would be awesome. But I think to say that I would do anything near someone like Einstein or Landau or Feynman, like that's like incredibly pretentious. I don't think I'm anywhere near that, and I still think there's beauty and meaning and like a lot of things to get from there. So.
Just, I guess, last question on this topic: is that because you feel like, there was more low hanging fruit and both a brilliant mind, like with tremendous amount of computing power, or like, and I ask that because arguably you could say today, and let's say you're going to say, listen, I don't have like, a 180 IQ or whatever it is. Like, I don't have that kind of computing power, but do modern methods and technology make up for some of that?
I think there's a bit of fetishism for IQ. I think,
okay.
Like the thing about Einstein and a lot of the greatest physicists were not necessarily their IQ. The elements that really contributed were, I think, a lot more complicated and a lot more, let's say, holistic. Like there's a lot of things that people generally, don't know about all of these things. For instance, like Einstein's known for gravitational waves that he proved that they exist, but right before he proved they exist, he sent a paper for publication proving that they don't exist, which the paper decided to review for the first time, and then send him back a review, to which he took a lot of offense and said, like, I didn't send you to review this, I sent this to publish. And then he like basically accepted the review but published elsewhere the results. Right. And I think, like, in a lot of things, you need very, very talented, creative, amazing people, but you also need all of the things around them. Like, you actually need those 99% of the people doing 1% of the work. Right. Without them, the 1% of the people can't do 99% of the work. So I think the whole system that allowed for this is really important. I think there are definitely differences. I think most of the problems that I see in the scientific world, I think, are really dependent on where you look. I think very few people know anything about what's going on in soft matter physics and what's called complex systems, because people have always considered, if it's really fundamental and it requires huge particle accelerators, then that's where we're going to find the new answers. And I think there's much more exciting things in fields that people don't know about outside of the scientific world. And I think that science is suffering from a lot of problems that society is suffering from, let's say. For instance, the basically misinformation, disinformation, the need to overstate your results in order to sell them when you need to publish them. Those are things that you see a lot. Like I've already, just doing literature review for some of the things I needed, seen a lot of papers that claim to do one thing, and when you read it, they do not even come close to doing that. And that's like even in the mild cases, because physics, you're limited. In other fields, it's.
So you're saying this field has been polluted as well?
Let's put it like this: the level of corruption of the field in the exact sciences is, I think, well within tolerance. Right, everything's working, and corruption's always going to pop up in those circumstances. So I think all in all, there's a lot of positive things. I think, like I said, that's one thing. I think another problem that science has in general is that it has become uh, very, very inaccessible, both for practical reasons and for like reasons that are not related to that. So, like you can't read a journal paper in any serious field if you don't already have a lot of training in that field. And that's a problem when you look at the scientific revolution because the whole point was democratizing the
Making it more
information.
accessible.
Yeah. So I'm just saying there's some inevitable obfuscation, but there's also like obfuscation that could have been solved or made better. But people are, let's say, maybe not doing it on purpose, but certainly not working really hard to make their work more accessible outside of their field. Everything. So specialization has a play in that. So if you ask me why science is like appears more stagnated, which I don't think necessarily reflects the situation. I think the reason that I could point to is that there's less interdisciplinary cross pollination.
Which would make like a polymath something like quite unique than today.
Yeah, I mean, even saying a polymath would generally mean like he's in the same field, but he has like two niches, right? Like that.
Right. No, I'm talking about like yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they don't exist, and I don't think they can in a lot of ways because every field
information out there today.
A lot of information in every field like goes very, very deep into its own rabbit hole, and there's a lot of let's say selection pressure to differentiate what you're doing from everything else, and very little pressure to integrate. And that's what I think. Like there's the when there's something that integrates different fields, I think it's very successful and has very meaningful results.
Which dovetails nicely with our conversation. Just as you said that, I was thinking about the slogan of "Together we will win," right? B'yachad nanatzach. And the podcast you sent me to listen to. So as some of you know, I was mentioning earlier, anyone that's watching, who's watching, 8 people are watching. Gilad and I have been having these conversations which relate to the current state of Israel right now and its war, and I guess some of our thoughts of the current war and the things that led up to this war and the social pressures and ramifications around it. And I called this specific stream, the Phoenix Rises or something, or the Rise of the Phoenix. I can't remember right now what I just wrote, but the Phoenix being Israel in this case, which there actually have been a few rabbis that gave that parallel, gave that example, because we've been burnt many times before. The whole book of Judges is very much about that, going back, coming back up, going back. So that's not new to us. However, I believe that both Gilad and I would much prefer us spread our wings and fly, and find a way to remove ourselves from the cycle where we have to keep on getting burnt. More so, I don't even know if with this rate of accelerations, if like the levels of, we thought for some reason that the Holocaust could have been the worst, but we could see that there's always surprises around the corner, and it's never. It would be foolish of us to think that our troubles are behind us, I guess, to say. So it would definitely require us to focus on our interior strife and recognize and try to realize that we're heading towards a cliff potentially. I also was sending you over the last few weeks. I wasn't really talking much, but I sent you some videos that were a little more pessimistic. Even though I don't know if I'm more optimistic, but generally I was maybe more optimistic. I sent you some of these videos just because, I don't believe in shoving my head in the sand, right? Like reality is reality at the end of the day. The specific video I'm thinking about it was that at the beginning of this war, there was a lot of talk about the ultra Orthodox or the Haredi movement joining in the army or enlisting, and there were some indications that was the case, and I was very excited about that. However, while there was some groups and some individuals that joined, and that's fantastic and that's great. I think, like you were talking about in the sciences, a lot of that was in the headlines, and a lot of that was might have been oversold. So that's obviously somewhat depressing. And so I wanted to jump in a little into this thing you sent me.
I want maybe
go ahead.
That is, so you were talking about the Phoenix, if I understood, in the sense of us being in trouble and being sort of attacked by external forces, and then
not necessarily.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is that there are two different ways to look at the Phoenix. Like, you were beaten down and then you rise up from your ashes, but there's also the element of that relates to the self, right?
Agreed.
That I think is relevant to at least what I wanted to address, which is if we don't realize what we have to part with, what has to burn out, then we can't rise up anew, right? Being
Agreed.
An old withering phoenix is a pretty bad place to be.
I would say both really merge, because the old withering phoenix is the one that could get hurt from from external forces, right? So it's less about the fact that, like, we got injured, can we get back up in the last round? It's more about the sense of in using this analogy, I'm biased because I'm Jewish and Israeli, but like being the part of the eternal people, right? So at some point, it seems like we've been, if you could say that there was an ash clearly during the Holocaust, and there was a certain sort of rising of the phoenix in the state of Israel. It's been 80 years, and the question is, how does this happen again, right? How do we how do we grow new wings again? And like I'm saying,
I don't want to interrupt you too much, but like there is like both of the times you mentioned that, like, the Holocaust has its own place, and October 7th and what's going on now is like nowhere near. So it just kind of
correct.
It bugged me when you're saying like this is happening again. It's like something bad is happening again, but like not this, with all of the pain around it.
Yes, it's not the Holocaust, of course. However, that is the closest thing to the Holocaust that our generation can relate to.
Yeah.
That and my point is that it's visceral in that sense, that it's horrific in a certain, like, yes, it's not organized as such, but it has certain indications, and hence why this this term Nazi was used, and it's the problematic use of it as well, as we could see in that podcast. But yes, so I'm more talking about the self in this case of really us searching and seeing who we are in this battle. Who are these soldiers? Who are these leaders? Who are we as individuals, as countrymen? So, it's a real big question. And sorry, you could continue with your framing. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, yeah, I think the framing was set. I didn't have anything.
So, okay, so a few things from listening to this podcast, this specific episode that I was thinking about. I wrote some notes. No, these are the wrong. This is from my shopping list.
So just to give background while you look at your notes
sure.
To the viewers. So the podcast was professor. He's religious. He studies he's a halakha researcher and philosopher, and he wrote the revised ethics code of the IDF. and he speaks in this podcast about the problems, the ethical and moral issues of where the IDF is today, and what that could potentially lead to from his viewpoint.
Right. So I would start with, while a lot of what he said carries like resonates with me, I wanted to frame certain things that are hard for me to hear. First off, a few times he talks about being like, I want to stress that I'm not an expert. And I'd say, like, correct, you're not an expert, which means we don't act like he walks in. Well, I should explain it first. He said, I was speaking recently to some soldiers, to officers, to be fair, because you're talking about to a quote unquote, like a more higher quality level of a soldier in this case. He mentions that he heard, I think he said one or two, one of them said about we need to flatten Gaza. And then another one, which was more disturbing, which I think he also admits is more disturbing, was, I can't remember if there's no how do you say Moravim?
There are no uninvolved parties.
Right, there's no uninvolved parties, or no one's innocent in Gaza. Right. Okay. So first off, using the term, and we were just fighting this in Hague right now, right? I'm not excusing it, but using the term like we need to flatten it, like, I'm sorry, that's a term that could be used. That doesn't mean I want to kill every one of the people over there, right? That's a term that could be used as, you could be like, that's a violent term, but we're going to show them who's boss. Does that mean you think you're going to be their boss? Like, no, it doesn't mean I think I'm going to be their boss. It means I'm going to really teach them a lesson right now. It means they need to feel a tremendous amount of, they need to feel a strong reaction from us. Now, again, the way that's used and who that's used, my point is, and this goes back to other conversations we had, it's how these terms are used. And like, we want to now say, like, this is a sweeping issue that everyone says we should, like, even when they say we should carpet bomb them, if you pin that person down and be like, do you mean you want to kill all the people in Gaza? He'll probably be like, that's not what I meant. I meant, like, we really got to stick it to them. Now, you could say that from a leadership perspective, hearing that, like, from Ben-Gvir is clearly a problem, 100%, and it makes its way down. And maybe you'll think like I'm harping on like a specific point too much, but there's something about it where he's like, I hear him using that term. I'm like, okay, that term doesn't bother me hearing from a soldier that his cousin might have been killed in October 7th. Number one. And you could respond to all of these, of course. I just want to paint a little picture of what was bothering me here. Another thing. Then he was talking about over here. Okay. We clearly, he said, I was noticing this inside the army, and I saw this, and this made me very worried, right? Like, if this, like, he's talking about how the values inside the army are crumbling. And now I stick that comment about like it's crumbling to, I'm not an expert. And he also mentions, I'm talking to a lot of people, and there's a tremendous good that he's doing, and there's so much happening. So is it 20% is like this? And if it's 20%, does that mean it's crumbling? It doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. But how are you deciding right now that this is sweeping inside the army and this is like an issue? Because I would want to see a lot more evidence, because as he tells the person running the podcast, he says, listen, you are looking, what interests you are headlines, because you are a man of media, but I'm talking to the people. So the podcast itself is sort of like a headline, which is like, it's spicy, but on the ground, is that actually true? I would tend to believe that most of the soldiers are still extremely super ethical. So when we hear stories about, and I don't know if this is validated or not, blowing up hospitals without permission, or shooting people without permission, we'll get to the captives in a second. Even if that's true and that's horrible and those people should be arrested, like Israel had to give Haag these secret documents where, even though Bibi was telling the country, we're not going to give any humanitarian aid, in reality, in the back channels, he's saying, no, you definitely have to give it to them. And you hear soldiers saying, commanders saying, make sure this happens and make sure they're being protected. So like, where's us being a super sensitive army, sending messages, letting people know. So it just felt like a lot of criticism, which I'm very open to hear, but I don't know if it was like a little too stressed.
So,
and then we could dive into criticism.
Yeah. So I'll try to answer the points one by one. So first of all, there's a few terms used, and one of them is erase Gaza, and to say there are no uninvolved parties is definitely, in an area where there's about half of the population are literally children. That is a very, very problematic thing to say. And generally, obviously, he also mentions an example that is much, much worse and much more disheartening. I don't know, again, if it's worth mentioning because it might be more spicy than it has content, but let's just say that that example, you can hear it later because I don't want to really repeat it, sounds like something Nazis would say, right? Like that's something that to hear from someone who is an officer in the army, that obviously he points like, considering all of our experience with the Holocaust, no Jew should even consider, speaking anything like this out loud, right? So there are some things that are certainly, inexcusable. But again, to say whether that's a representative example or not is difficult. The thing that I think it does represent, and Isaac, he talks about it, is he talks about the complete contempt and defunding and removal of resources from any of the ethical elements of the army. So where in the past he and the other writers of this ethics code were invited to talk frequently in the training of officers in the army, now he says this ethics code has been demoted to the level of law. So like, this is only, within, and I think this relates, you can bring the appropriate Jewish connotations to that, but it definitely relates to the Midrash about, Jerusalem was destroyed because it was ruled by Dinei Torah,
Right.
Because even if you put the best laws, but you're just going by the letter of the law, and anything above that is like, you can get away with a lot of sin even when the laws are great, then you're going downhill fast. So I think that to me was the point where, he's the expert on that. He is the person who wrote that ethics code. He's very connected to how that's being conveyed in the army. That is his expertise, and that's a point that I think is the most critical in that part of the criticism. The other part is I want to say about like the way that we can absolve ourselves from responsibility for our words because we have, let's say, good reason, right? Like so he also points this, like, there are, we should separate between the arguments to our defense and the arguments for our circumstances, right? If a captive, or even if the hostages that were killed by our own forces, those things that had happened in complete violation of orders, right? They are offenses. We have completely mixed up between considering mitigating circumstances to absolving people of the crime that they actually did commit. And that is also a very big problem, which I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this goes to Eloy Rosaria. That confusion was the very heart of that case, right? Because it's very clear what he did. It's very clear the context in which he did it, and to say, well, if it was, if we can say that it's okay because we hate the guy that he killed, then we should let him off the hook, right? We shouldn't hold him to the standard of the law, and that's where I think, when talking about like the way we use words, I think whether you're an officer, whether even a simple soldier, and definitely when you're in leadership, you are accountable for your words, period. When you say that we want to carpet bomb Gaza like Dresden was carpet bombed, then there's like, when you go to The Hague, literally that's what happened. They're going to say, well, here's motive. You say you want to commit genocide. Like, I'm thinking in the absurd situation that we're in, right? And it is absurd to accuse Israel after having been attacked by a brutal terrorist attack with genocidal intent, right? To be accused of genocide is an absurd situation that our own rot has contributed immensely to bring us towards, right? If our politicians did nothing but to make sure that we are represented as best we can towards the world, if they did the very basic element of public relations, right? And certainly, when we talk about the actual consequences on the ground that could not have been avoided by their insane jargon, we would have been in a much better place today. So I don't know if it would have been roses and rainbows, right? I'm certain it wouldn't have been, but I mean,
we wouldn't have to be spending time on this.
We wouldn't have to be spending time on this, and
this being the court case, which sorry, go. I don't want to stop your role. Go on.
I'm just saying, right? When I try to, abstract myself and pull myself back, and I would say, let's say another country was in this situation, right? I would see Russia, whatever. You can put whatever country you want in there.
Yeah.
Perpetrating like mass destruction in a certain area, seeing terrible humanitarian disaster, and then hearing them talk and saying like, we don't believe there's any innocence in there, and we want. I'm just saying, if I were ignorant, right? If I were someone on the other side of the world seeing that, why the hell would I think anything else? I would think like, okay, they got
right.
this out.
You're right if someone is ignorant, and you could be like, well, Chazi, you can't assume everyone to be looking into the information. But I would just say, I would then say, but those are not the policies of the government. And they also try to create give humanitarian aid. And they do warn the people to get out. And so I understand that the way the world sees that. First of all, the answer is yes, I agree with you that we were extremely reckless. Our government was extremely reckless with the terms they use and the words they use. And to be fair, in this podcast, he mentions that you hear this on both sides.
You don't hear this on both sides. He mentions a specific problem with the other side that take a side on the issue of the hostages and try to.
He mentions that the guy running the podcast, I'm forgetting his name right now. He's mentioning how his friends in his circle are using terms like destroy a race,
Yeah.
like that, right? So this
Yeah,
point,
but they're not. They're using it in let's say private conversations, which is a different problem. Like they're not putting this online for everyone to see. That's a like
putting it online for everyone to see would be who? Would be Ben Gvir and Smotrich? Would be like the right wing, let's say the Likud? Is that what we would be saying?
generally speaking, like as a rule of thumb, for sure.
And Gallant, I guess, right?
Gallant. I mean, for sure. Gallant, right. The president Herzog, signing the artillery shell, like we're some South American banana republic. I don't know.
So now there's another thing I wanted to talk about. When there's a few things. Another thing he mentions is he says, and I hear that he says people give me examples that they looked into like 500 different houses, and every house they had like weapons, right? So like now, how do we know that they weren't first forced to put the weapons over there? And so okay, great. Then don't do anything. You know what I mean? Because like at some point you have to ask yourself, this 13-year-old kid is running me with a gun. Is he evil? No, he's not evil. He's possessed by evil though. And I need to make sure that he stays away from me right now at this moment. Now, he's again saying, I'm not an expert. Now I have to, the government, the country, the army has to start making assumptions and start to try to figure things out with their data and their intelligence. I don't know. We did a poll and we see between 70 to 80% of people in the occupied territories were pro the events of October 7th. We see now UNRWA, which we've been saying for years, is now getting defunded by people. It seems like there are a lot of people, like even organizations that do humanitarian things, are also involved in this and are corrupt. So I think it's a little naive to say, yes, you are correct that Gaza, and it's not fair. Like, they were elected democratically, so it's their fault. Yes, there's innocent people. Yes, it's horrible what's happening to a lot of those people over there. But to pretend that there isn't a tremendous amount of hate within the population is silly. It's just silly. And
of course, but I don't think. I mean, it's interesting to hear.
I'm asking, how do you make a statement then? What does he want there to be? For us to say?
So the way I read his point, he wasn't saying like because you find explosives in 150 houses, then all of these people should be given immunity, because who knows? Like, if you decide operationally that destroying these houses or clearing out this area, whatever, would cost some, loss of life, how do you count this loss of life? If you count them as terrorists, you'll act one way. If you count them as uninvolved parties that might be innocent, you'll act in a different way. And like I think the place where he says rightfully he's not an expert is like operationally he doesn't know, and I don't think he pretends to know. Like, what should the soldier do when he sees someone come out of a house that is well known to be used for firing explosives? What is the delay that should happen between seeing that person and suspecting that they might have hostile intent to firing your weapon at them, right? And that's a difficult question. But and then he was referring to an officer saying, we found explosives in all of their houses, therefore they are all guilty.
But
that's a difference to saying, like, look, there are explosives.
But is that true? Agreed. I would argue that I think that is not what is prevalent inside the army, that people think like there are, and they're all terrorists. I just don't think that's not, first of all, that's definitely not the way I see it. And that's not what I hear from our leaders. I understand. And when I hear them say, it's very charitable for people to say, like, when they're singing From the River to the Sea, no, they mean peace, and no, they mean this, and no. So give me some of that. When I say wipe them down, I don't mean kill them all, right? I'm just saying, like, there's a double standard, which is like, we're expected to look at the world, right? These three presidents from like Oxford or Yale and MIT. I need the context for the genocide, So I'm saying, like, we're using terms over here. When I say 500, when I see these houses that have these missiles inside, I'm not thinking every house over here and every citizen over here and every kid over here needs to be killed. It does paint a picture with other information out there that I have to take into consideration.
So I'm gonna say, right, let's take the other side, right? Because when someone says from the river to the sea, and they say, no, we mean love, I'm saying that's bullshit. And when someone says flatten them and says, no, we just mean meticulously and surgically remove only the bad elements, I'm saying that's bullshit, right?
No, so
I'm saying like you may eventually act differently, right? But I think that when we're talking about Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Avi Maoz, for example, I think these are people that really have those intents, right? I have no reason to suspect that they see Gazan lives as something that they need to work to make any real effort to protect. I have no indication that that's the case.
So first of all, I want to, and I know this sounds silly, but I want to differentiate between them wanting to kill Gazans to them not putting in the right amount of effort to protecting Gazans. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't say they want to kill Gazans, but the impact is not like that is only one little degree removed from wanting to kill them, right?
Yeah. So
like
the reason I say
it's like it might be extra effort to want to directly kill them, right? Maybe we don't have to put all that effort, but we definitely don't mind them dying. That's a pretty bad place to be.
I'm with you. My point was just because of painting a picture of like, Israelis being like wanting to create genocide. And I know you could tell me that like, it could be like a second order consequence of what we're doing. And next thing you know, you're already there killing them. But the reason I mention this is because he also in the podcast, he talks about sort of his like slight optimism and like what could be done. And he mentions how we need to fight ala derech hatova, right? We need to fight on the right path. And Avi Sagi is saying this. They don't talk about this, but Avi Sagi's derech hatova and his ethics are through the prism of his religious life. And I would say that, for me, returning to the Phoenix is obviously going back to, I could come and say, listen, it's like the ratio of civilians to dead combatants, relatively speaking, is low compared to other wars right now. You could say Israel's actually doing relatively a good job. I know that sounds horrible, but I'm saying as far as keeping the casualties low, I know it's hard for us to handle and hear that when we hear like 26,000, 30,000, but those are, let's say, the statistics on the ground. As a Jewish and a religious person, I want to come and say like, I want even a higher standard, right? Like I want to know that like, we're like doing the best we can. And that's from every level of how we interact in society. Now, arguably, you would say Ben Gvir and his mindset is also fueled by religious beliefs, right? Of like why this land is mine and why I'm okay getting rid of these people. And that brings us to like a concept that we also have to deal with in Hag, which is relevant to this weekly portion, because this weekly portion, we first interact with the Amalekite, and we also called these people the Amalekites as well. Now, to be fair, no one in Israel said that everyone in Gaza and all Arabs are Amalekites. They said we have to get rid of, and it was in focus on the Hamas or the enemy. Regardless, it was a bad choice of words. However, this goes back in a certain sense to that tension, which is you have some in this country that feel that they are representing Judaism, right? And he'll talk about, let's say, those soldiers that he feels like are inside the army and are inside leadership. Over half of the officer school in the army is religious. Okay. However,
wait. Did you mean that Avi Sagi is representing Judaism, or
Avi Sagi? No. When I say Avi Sagi says that we need to return to the derech hatova, to the right path, I would have to believe that he also means, right, a certain way of ethical living, and he personally does that through the Torah, right? Now,
yeah. As far as I know, he never claims to represent
He more than that. He says I don't represent. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me what he says. He still represents a person, and when he says the right path, it's coming out of your mouth, and the way you live your right path is you pray every day, right? I'm saying he lives a certain life, and he lives in this country, and he says, like, I didn't leave any other country. My point is, I can't disconnect his opinion from his religion, because that is the person he is. I thought my point was, when I hear this secular person on the podcast asking, like, what could be done, and he says we need to return to the right path, I wonder, and this is a conversation we could have, like, what does that right path look like, right? Like, to me, that's coming back to our roots. Having said that, you could argue that's what Ben Gvir thinks he's doing, right? He thinks I am fighting for my roots. I'm fighting for my religious roots, that the way they manifest is me now getting rid of all this population and taking over Gaza and taking land and moving back over here. That's all part of the Derech HaTovah as far as he's concerned.
I'm not sure what we're doing though. Is this feels like an exercise in moral relativism, right? Because
no,
sure, he does. He's wrong.
No. Correct. My point was, though, about this Derech Tovah that we want to get back to, okay? Which my point is to find our way back to the Derech Tovah, right? To orient ourselves properly, I would claim we need to return to our sources. And that brings us back in a certain case to pre-October 7th, to those in a certain case, the tension we had, which I think we also still need to go back, because he says we went into the army beyachad, and we use a slogan of together we're going to win. But right before the army, we were completely divided. So what are we talking about, this togetherness that we went into the army to win, if we don't even know what this togetherness look like? And then he says, to end it, he says we have to get back on the good path. So one, who is this togetherness? And B, what does this path look like?
But I'm trying to think how to say this without sort of making it too dependent on what was said in the podcast, because I think there are certain things we understood differently, and I do want to respect also the viewers.
What is this? Baruch Mirachem is living. Yeah, he's a bad dude, Jacob. We all know he's a bad dude.
But yeah, I mean, it's still worth mentioning, because it is insane. It is.
Well, we tried to make peace with Yasser Arafat, right? Just saying, like, if we're going to entertain, yes, it's insane and he's a bad person, but
Ben Gvir didn't try to make peace with Yasser Arafat. I'm just saying, like, Ben Gvir, the fact that someone like him is in government is on any level, it is insane. It is the sign of insanity, right? Like, no sane country would have this person have any official role. It's hard to grasp that this is the reality every single day. It is hard to grasp that. All I'm saying, in relation to what we do and what obviously he said, like, let's even use the concept of the phoenix, right? There are things that you and I and the people protesting on the streets and the people who are not insane, that are not possessed in a manner that is, at least for the moment, beyond communication, that we can cooperate on, that we can agree on, that you and I can agree on, as I think we generally do. And that requires us to burn away a lot of the things that are let's say, eating away at us, to our very core, before they consume us. So when we talk about, Derech HaTovah, I think even if we agree to grow, like you said, if we agree to go back to our roots, and everyone in Israel agrees to have deep conversations about the roots in Judaism and in religion, and basically we're all sort of within a religious framework, we'll still have massive disagreements, just like with Ben Gvir, that really believes that these are his roots. So I don't see why the secular versus religious has to really come in here. Sure, there are differences. There are differences within religion. There are differences within the secular world. There are differences between the religious and the secular world. We need to be oriented towards the good. We need to be oriented towards the good in a way that we can live with ourselves first and foremost. The moral standard that we need to set for ourselves cannot be set by neither by the example of our enemies, nor by our impulsive emotional response to what had happened. For one, like,
what should it be set by, though? I mean, that to me goes back to the Derech HaTovah, right? What is the good?
Well, if it were definable, right? If the good were something I could just lay out and say, like, well, this is the good, then you could say that you can know for sure that I'm ideologically possessed and I'm idolatrous, right? Like I said, you do that, you're good.
Well, I would argue that why I'm some of what pains me, right, is I could be standing in synagogue and hearing like the rabbi give an example and say like, yeah, make like a racist joke about the Arabs, and that's a problem, right? Or like what I would want to hear is, what I would want to hear is Ben Gvir say his statements, and then someone come to him, authorities come to him, and like religious authorities, and say, "What about Ashrei Adam Sheniya B'Tselem? What about all the things that we have in our system that come and say any behavior like that or that kind of sentence is very problematic?" So like, it's
right.
Not that
I'd be happy to hear that. I'd be happy to hear that because like, why not speak that way if you have the ability, and sometimes I find myself that I have the ability to speak with religious people in religious terms because I have that knowledge and I've studied that and I find beauty in it. It's not like I'm manipulating them, and I think that's great when it's possible. But also there are a lot of other influences. Like if you come to this leftist secular person that says we should flatten Gaza, or the Gazans are all guilty because they chose the Hamas, and you convince him with a quote of the Buddha or of Socrates, great, do that. I don't like, if there is an arrow that goes towards the good and we can sort of grasp it together, you and I, and we can sort of move, maybe not in the right direction, but at least in a direction that brings us a bit closer to where we should be. Let's do that. And I think we can, right? I think that in our conversation, despite having, I believe, a lot of differences of opinion in a lot of areas, like why do we need, like, I really don't understand what you're trying to point to in why Derech Tovah has to be now contended on a religious versus secular framing.
Just because he's asking why he's optimistic. So the reason I'm optimistic is because I believe we're eternal. I believe we're eternal as long as we maintain and try to stay on the right course as given to us by God. So like, hence when I say he says a Derech HaTovah and he remains optimistic, and the interviewer is saying like, well, I don't, and he says like, even the last two podcasts, like, I don't agree with you. And I don't understand where you're coming from. I don't see it. And my point would be like, well, what's your frame? Right? Like, and it's a question is like, why are we in this land? What are we doing? What, like, all these things come back to me towards that question. And if we're trying to argue and see like, how could I decide if what I'm doing is moral or not? Right? Who is my enemy? Why is he my enemy? Why are we fighting? What are we doing over here? How am I actually and this relates also back to, to the captives. How am I going to make this kind of calculation? How am I going to, how am I defining these scenarios? So I would understand why someone feels at a loss, because very quickly I have to start asking myself, like, why am I doing it to these people? Why am I even here? Like, how am I justifying what's happening over here? And now you could find an extreme, and that's an extreme. It's scary to look at, let's say, religious leaders and them come to say, oh, what's happening right now, this is considered a milchemet mitzvah, like a just war. And because of that, there are ramifications for that, right? I'm allowed to kill X, I'm allowed to kill Y. That can make people feel very worried, right? Like, I'm not going to be killing these people because the man in the book or the man in the sky told me. I'm going to be killing these people because some sort of authority. That's some sort of authority, or like the morality, right? That body also is Hag, right? Because apparently the world says that they're the authority and they know, and they're going to tell us what morality is. And you and I both agree that's gobbledygook. What are you talking about? That's crazy that we're even in that scenario, including that we put ourselves there by saying those stupid things. But you and I both know that, like, it was a farce that we were even there. It doesn't mean that we don't get a new, and it doesn't mean that, like, we have to be more careful with how we talk. My point being, like, if we're looking for a North Star, is it secular morality that's going to take us there? Like the derech hatovah that we're trying to look for.
So I think there's, like, you're pointing at some place where we disagree, right? Because I think, again, there is, both in the religious framing and in the secular framing, there is meaning and there is significance in the secular morality, right? But however you want to look at it. And when I say that it's ridiculous that we were at The Hague, I'm saying, right, the fact that we were so negligent as to allow for that case to reach there is where I see it as ridiculous, right? But the fact that The Hague is allowed, or that in this sort of situation,
yeah,
right? Again,
where's Iran? Where's China? Where's Russia? Like, I'm saying, where's Hague again? Like the UN. Like, my point is, like, if you're going to talk to me about, like, that,
The Hague has judged individuals from Russia, for instance, and cases are being built, for instance, for the abduction of children from Ukraine. I think those are, like, as flawed as they are, those are good things.
Yes, those are good things. Would you not agree that there's a bias against Israel in the UN?
Of course, there's a bias, but again, I think that's the issue I have with a lot of the talks I have with. I don't even know how to classify it, but a lot of talks I have with people where, like, you point to, right, very serious, very dramatic faults in certain institutions. Thus, they're let's burn them down, or let's
burn them down. Not let's burn them down. But is that what you're saying? But, like, what are they going to say? Like, okay, like, why are you deciding that this is what's going to decide for you what's true and what's not true?
The problem I have with that question is, like, I know that if I ask you, why are you deciding, then you'd have your answer, right? And it's a religious answer, and I respect that, and that's okay. But in a way, the question of why is, far beyond any rational argumentation. Like, if whatever answer you give me would have to, like, infinitely regress into the why of whys eventually, and then, like, okay, well, you just do, right? At the end of the day, you really you do believe in certain things, and you don't believe in other things.
Yeah, but then I would argue, but now you're where the rubber hits the road, right? You're like, why? Because I believe that, like, if I do X, Y, Z, then I'm not doing genocide. If I'm doing X, Y, Z, I am doing genocide. Well, here Israel comes and says, like, according to the rule book, I don't have to do this, and I don't have to do this, and I don't have to do this, but I am going to do this, and I am going to do this, and I am going to do this. But the world still says, but you're still committing genocide. Okay, so I'll change it. What if I say this thing? What if I do that thing? No, that's not still good enough. That's not still good enough.
Just let me just be clear. So I didn't mean that, like, if the entire world says X, then now X suddenly became reality, right? It doesn't matter how many people say something false, it doesn't become true. That's not my point here, right? To say that the Hague, in my opinion, having received this request, I don't know enough about the legal framework to say what exactly it should have done and whether this ruling should have been different, right? But the two operational elements that were ordered by the court seem very reasonable. Humanitarian aid.
What they ruled, for sure, was reasonable. Like we're doing it. I mean, thank God, it's the best.
Not the second one. Not stop inciting genocide, right? Like that's the thing where you say, let's drop an atom bomb on Gaza. And it's like, yeah, of course it's stupid because we get hit by the atom bomb, but the jargon, like the way you talk about it, you should stop doing that. You really should. And it's right. I think that I have no issue with the world telling any country that says right. that, stop doing that.
Sure.
So to me, like, I don't know, like, all of the bits and pieces, the ins and outs, but I think that was quite reasonable. And my point of saying, like, why do I think killing people is bad for no reason? Why do I think genocide is bad? Why do I think? I don't eventually go back and say, well, it was written in the Bible, do not murder, but that doesn't matter to me when I try to reach a ground where we can communicate. Like, do we agree that it's bad? Good. Now let's work on getting it done.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're walking around thinking, right, like Ben-Gvir might be thinking that, these people aren't all innocent and these people are the enemy, right? Then killing them is good, right? Not, this relates to right now. Okay. So you have Tzav Tesha, this organization. Have you heard about them? That they're blocking the humanitarian aid going into Gaza, right? Now their claim is, hell no. What about the humanitarian aid for my sons, right? For the hostages, until they're not released, we're not letting them go, right? And now, what a horrible situation. Now, I ask this seriously. We come and say, listen, Chazi, we're hearing this rhetoric about like genocide and things like that. You guys got to stop this right now, right? We can't have any of this kind of conversation. What about the argument that, and I'm not saying, I'm saying language like that in this kind of neighborhood is necessary. Right now, you'd be like, no, there's no way. Now you could say, like, listen, you're right.
I have a different argument regarding that. So I think
I just want to clarify what I mean about the language like this, because I'm not saying like people should be calling for genocide. My point is coming out as I'm the crazy man that you don't want to mess with, right? Like, I'm going to kill everyone if you try to do something like that again. Like, no one's going to eat. And the idea is that you're dealing in a very rough neighborhood, that if you keep on trying to like play nice, you are going to get overtaken, right? They're going to see, like, listen, at the end of the day, even if you poke and prep and kill and murder them, they're never going to go buck wild, right? They're always going to still act Western, right? They're going to act according to these values that we decided as a community that everyone have to adhere to, but we're not going to adhere to those rules, though, right? We're going to say it's okay that, like, you bombed us, but, like, we're still going to bomb. Now, you could be like, yes, that's us acting moral. Or you could argue that you are endangering your people by acting in this manner.
So, like, you're bundling up a few things in there. So let me just separate. If, right, the question is whether you should go like, well, we can tolerate having rockets shot at us and people dying, and then, the October 7th events, and we could have a mild response and just live with it. then no, that's not moral. That's not moral by any reasonable standard of morality, right? And if you're saying, a powerful response has to be carried out, and the things that we are doing, the actual reality on the ground is immensely more significant than it was before, because this is a clear escalation. Yeah, that's the reality, right? Now, if you tell me whether you put some words on that or don't put some words on that, whether that's going to make a big difference, I don't think so. And I think the in terms of like how people are going to view us, and the obsession that I think, like worldwide, but definitely that I see in this government from its onset up to now, the obsession with appearances. If we can just say something and then it would become a reality, everyone would just believe us, even if we're lying, like we're saying, like you said, we will say that we don't give humanitarian aid, but we'll give them humanitarian aid. We'll say that we'll flatten them, but we won't flatten them. Like the issue with that, and that's very well documented across history, very easy to see if you look at open source intelligence about the war in Ukraine from Russia's side, and was also the case in the end of the Third Reich, is when you're trying to, address your image, let's say, an image that you're trying to claim, right? And I think in a way it's true. You're trying to claim it's a false image. We just want to look crazy, right? We don't want to actually be crazy and kill millions of people. The self-deception is just as strong, if not stronger, than the deception you're causing. So the issue is exactly like this campaign from the Reserve Army people and the things like, just shut up. Our problem is that we were talking too much. And people are saying, but we're pointing at real flaws that we have. We shouldn't be talking about our flaws because other people see it. And if we just don't talk about it, then everything will be fine. Just don't mention our flaws all the time, and then they will stop existing. And to me, like, that is that one point where I think, I don't know, we are so far at that extreme that I think we really need to move a lot. Like, before reaching the other extreme, we would have to move a lot towards it.
What's
right?
So like
the other extreme is like the actual talking too much. Like if you're talking about really just exposing flaws that would be completely unnecessary because they're already dealt with, and we should be trusting our public officials because they're really committed and doing a good job, but instead we're just throwing mud at them. Right? If we get to that extreme, I'll definitely say like we should talk less. But right now, the situation is we need to point at truth. Truth is.
I know, but I'm saying, so when you're pointing at truth, why doesn't it start with, wow, how fantastic these armies are? Wow, how amazing they're trying. Most of them don't want to be there. They want to be defending. It's called the Israel Defense Force. It's not there to kill. It's not there to destroy. It's there to defend. And the only reason they're there and not home with their families is because they were called to do so, and they're there to defend their countrymen and they're to defend their people. And they're trying to be as moral as they can. And like, why is the focus not on that? Even if you are correct that there are issues, right? Like they come and say, what happened with these captives? Apparently, I mean, with this investigation is that they were told after the first two were shot, or after the first one was shot, they were told to cease fire. Okay? Yeah. You're right. A horrible mistake, but there's not 100 of those. So why we act like they're the most horrible thing, the most horrible thing, the most horrible, it is a horrible thing, but that doesn't define the Israeli army. That's not like an issue that like this is under like, now you could be like, no, Chez, you have to understand. This is the one we know about, but really there are thousands of these. Are there? Even if there's 10, even if there's 20, even if there's 30, I would want to know what percentage of that is compared to other wars and other armies. And if it's below that, then you don't need to talk about it. Because you could come and say, like, there's a new issue in Israel right now, which is like, I don't know, old people are mugging ladies. And then you could look at it and look at the stats, and is it actually an issue, or am I making it an issue by talking about it?
So I don't know how we got, like, I still think we're sort of talking past each other, right? Because you were talking about how we need to make ourselves, we need to talk crazy talk to be respected
No,
in our neighborhood.
first of all, I'm not saying that's what we need to do. I'm just saying I'm asking you your thoughts on now, and I would agree with you that when you are lying, at some point you have to lean into the lie, which starts becoming very dangerous, right? Once you start not recognizing where the deception ends and where like the real you, quote unquote.
And I think when it's a country, right?
Yeah, and you think we're there?
The first people you're lying to are your own population, and I think in terms of the effect that this has, let's say, trickling down to people on the ground, I think the evidence that has an effect is plenty, right?
Yeah, what has an effect?
The genocidal jargon, the genocidal, not jargon, like it's what's the word I'm looking for? I keep using jargon. Genocidal rhetoric. Genocidal rhetoric. It's definitely has. I mean, you can never attribute that one cause, but like the soldiers that have perpetrated acts that would be completely unacceptable by both you and yours and mine opinion are speaking the same jargon. It's the same rhetoric, right? So
I understand, but okay, sure. I would argue that there's something called Ask Gil or Gil Asks or things like that. Something online about this guy that goes around asking the Arabs, Jews. I'll send you it. But if you ask the majority of Jews if they could have peace, what would they want? That is what they want. And that's what should be highlighted. Like, to me, like the focus on like, and again, I'm putting Ben Gvir aside, because like you mentioned, like when it comes from a position of power, you're 100% right. The fact that Soldier X says this, right? So let's focus on like, everyone was very happy about this celebrity from Fauda, this actor came out and spoke, and he said, like 99% of the soldiers, that's their opinion. They're with him. They're like him. That's what they want. Like, I just look at this as like the shut up campaign, which by the way, my cousin started. It wasn't about shut up, don't air dirty laundry. Illegal things should be talked about. Wayward soldiers should be arrested. His attitude was like a demoralizing conversation, which is like as if we shouldn't be here. We're not a moral army. The war is ending. We're stopping now. We didn't even reach our goals. Our goals are unachievable. Their attitude was like, what are you talking about? And in a real sense, like we're away from our wives. We're in the battle. We're fighting. We're giving our lives. You're just nonstop talking about like, what are we doing? We're mistakes. We're too happy on the trigger. Like, is that the case? Because the people I know and the people I see, and I'm sure you know a lot of these people too, your friends that are in the army, do you see them as moral people, these people that you know, or do you look at them as being like, all these people are like any second they're just gonna start like mowing down people, mowing down civilians? And even if you could come and say, listen, Chazi, what obviously he's pointing to, he's saying, yes, we know that the government is problematic, but the soldiers, the people, they're great. He comes and tells you, listen, Chazi, there's an issue with their ethics and morality, right? I write the code, and I'm telling you, what I heard in the army was disturbing. And then my question was, because that's what I said. Later on, he says, I talk to the people. I'm not looking for headlines. And in the people, I see people want unity. People want together. So I would say, yes, talk to the people and talk to the soldiers. You heard that one soldier say X. Now ask him, do you want to kill? Ask him 2 more questions and see if he's still that guy you're worried about. I would argue he's not.
So again, I think you're missing obviously his point. I don't think that his point was these soldiers want to kill people. He said that the conflict, all of the demons that are in our society are breaking out now. What tenfold when we're at war. War is not a healing power. It's exacerbating whatever ailments you have. I don't think he was saying that these people are not moral. He was saying the army has neglected its role in giving these people the proper education, that when they go out into the battlefield and they see someone waving a white flag, right, that they would have that, additional second of saying, like, maybe I shoot their legs.
So, like, how do you know? How many, show me how many soldiers, how many kids, how many grandmothers that they did help, that they didn't shoot, that they did take out of Gaza, that they did help. Because I hear stories about they found a family, he was still stuck there, he didn't get away to the north, they took him out. Why is that not being celebrated? Look what they did. They helped this family get out of Gaza. Is it not one-to-one? Does that one story not cover the story of him killing the person? Like, I hear what he's saying and I hear what he's pointing out, and I would even argue that Chazi, if he said one or two, he clearly feels it more than just that one or two soldiers that he spoke to. He felt it like in the air.
Of course, right? Even in the worst wars with completely unhinged armies, right? There were cases of people behaving morally. And there are a lot of cases in here of people behaving morally. And there are, I agree, they should be celebrated, right? The
More than that, clearly, Bibi the fascist was actually giving humanitarian aid. There's other issues, him lying to his country, but clearly he was like, yeah, that's nuts. I'm obviously not going to give the humanitarian aid.
Or, the
right, he's Machiavellian, playing a game, right?
Yeah, I mean,
by the way, sure.
Whatever.
So he's doing.
It might be. I don't even care about his motives. That's not the point here, right? Like my issue, and that's what I said, is you have, or my issue. What obviously he is pointing to, right? He's saying there's a framework under which the IDF was built and has been operating. That framework includes a strong focus on, ethical education of soldiers, especially at the level of the officers, right? They should have not only the professional training, but they should have ethical training. That is a part of the constituting element of the IDF. And he's saying this is being shown contempt by the IDF. It's being defunded. They're not treating it with the proper respect, and at best, it's a plaque on the wall, that becomes mere law rather than values to strive for. And I mean,
yeah, what about the ethics they're coming from? Like, I'm just saying, I'm just using this as an example, not to show like the divide between secular and religious, but like we said, over 50% of officer school is Orthodox. And what about their ethics that they're coming from their home and from their school and from the programs they went to? Years and years and years and years of studying ethics built into their system. Okay, where they have to respect the other one and love the other. I'm just saying, so it's not like you're saying they're coming to the army, and I'm not saying that they're learning at home how to engage in war and the ethics of war. I understand that that's different. My point being about like valuing one's other life. It's not like we're getting someone into the army and he's like a jarhead and like he knows nothing. You're getting over here quality civilians that, and I'm not saying they're not quality from secular places, but if they're coming from Orthodox homes, they've definitely been through at least 15 years worth of ethics focused education.
Okay. I don't know what to do with that information. How does that relate to the fact to what obviously he was pointing to?
My point is that even if it's true that there's an issue that it turned into a plaque in the wall, to me, that doesn't result into total decay in the army. And now I could see the moral scaffolding collapsing. Because I would argue to Avi Sagi, the moral scaffolding is 3,000 years deep. It doesn't end in the plaque that you put together. It doesn't mean it's not important. It just, I hold these soldiers in a higher regard. And I hold that before they shoot, right? Before they shoot, they're not thinking, what did I read in officer school? But who am I as an individual and what am I doing? And do I want to be killing people?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think that once, you look at something so deep systematically, right, it's an indication of a lot of different elements in the system that have devalued it, right? When you see like the whole thing, the whole project that was a very big part of this organization being devalued, it means that's like on a framework level of the organization.
And does it mean it's bad? Because you could argue, I don't know, you could argue that we did this values, you wrote it, we integrated it, it went very well, people took tests at it. Again, it's also in the law right now. Now he's saying it's an issue once you decouple it and becomes law. Yeah, maybe that issue will merge in another 20 years. How do you know the issue is now? How do you know, like, now we've reached this point where I sense it that the ethics are crumbling? So because of the example of these soldiers were killed, and it's to go to Avi Sagi. So let me get this straight: how many mistakes are we allowed to have a year that you'll feel like my course still stands? Is it 5, 10, 20? What level of mistake would you consider not ethical at this point? Like that now there's an issue, and how would he know if it got better? What's his metric?
Like you have very let's say intrinsic issues with measuring any sort of thing of this sort, right? Like I'm sure you know that.
We're talking. My tension is like he comes and says in the podcast, like, I felt uncomfortable, and I'm like, sure, you felt uncomfortable with that anecdotal story. So do I. I also feel uncomfortable with you using that story as a framing of like issue now. Not when I say you, I meant
the framing of issue, as far as I understood, right? The framing of issue within the whole episode was, right, you have actual cases of insubordination within the army. Right.
Which, to be fair, I don't know about those, and if that's true, obviously horrible. And then two would be how many of those, and how many compared to other years, and how many compared to other armies.
So, compared to our own army, in different years, in different cases, this is something, right? None of us have perfect knowledge of this, but I've heard from people that I trust to a high enough degree, right, that have not failed me in their reporting, that this is much more significant than in the past. If we're talking about people on uniform, supporting or just promoting themselves, promoting political agendas like resettling Gaza.
And it's not necessarily a political agenda.
What is it then?
I mean, it would be dependent who says it.
What? What do you mean?
My point is, like, I would say that if it's a soldier that was removed from Gush Katif in the past, and he's saying that I want to come back to my house, I take that very differently than a member of Knesset saying we should take Gaza back. One is a very big problem. One is like, okay, this soldier is expressing him wanting to come back. This soldier has religious beliefs that he wants to come back. That's very different. And it would also be different if an officer says that. I'm just saying, like, I don't care if soldier X says we should come back over here. Great. Like, I don't care if soldier Y says we shouldn't be here at all. Are you doing what you're
the underlying issue, right? Yeah. Is saying, and this goes with the insubordination, right? The underlying issue is to say, well, the powers that be may have different plans, but us on the ground here, we'll make sure, or we'll do our best to make sure that our aspirations come to pass, right? That's a very big problem, and the fact that there are documented cases now of insubordination in, let's say, the blowing up of structures in Gaza, and the just lack of response. Basically, these soldiers, as far as anyone has reported, to the best of my knowledge, etc., etc.,
Right.
right? Basically, we see very, very little response to insubordination. We're talking about like for instance, the soldiers that called Shema Israel in the mosque in
Yeah.
Gaza,
Yeah.
and the whole political circus around them.
Right.
We're talking about the soldiers that took professional, huge banners, put them on the Hummers as they're being released from army service. That
Right.
we were also released without determining the war or something like that. Lahria,
Yeah.
and the whole issue of saying, like, not only are we serving in the army with the purpose of defending Israel, we are here to also dictate what Israel should be doing.
Are they doing that? Because what you're telling me is right now they're leaving Gaza disappointed with a sign, leaving, not staying inside, right? Because if they would have been arrested. So you're saying they're protesting, almost like you would say, like stopping in the middle of the street illegally and stopping the traffic, even though that's illegal to protest that way, and then blocking the Air Force, like it's illegal to protest that way. So yes, it's illegal for them to do that, and those soldiers, maybe they should be arrested. Maybe for morale, that's a bad tactical move to do. I don't know. But there's an issue with an individual person, just like there was these soldiers that decided that they didn't want to be watchers, like Tatzpitaniyot, right? And they were arrested, right? So again, you're like, I know this also has to do with the shut up. The army is coming and looking, saying like, look, we saw how many, is it all the soldiers? How many soldiers are doing this? Are you giving me a picture of, listen, Chazi, it's like the talks we were having about before October 7th. It's in all the army. You can see everywhere people are having issues with the war. They're not going to show up. Is it prevalent? Is it not prevalent? People saying it's everywhere. People saying it's only a few people. It's all the pilots. It's some of the pilots. It's the official pilots. It's not really. If you look at the list, it's pilots that are already not in reserves anymore, so we can't count them. And I know it's annoying that you break it down to these levels, but this is why I can't stand the media today, which is how, and I know you're saying the sources that are telling you this are not the media, but they tell you that, like, I heard in Golani, they did this, this, and this. Okay, pretty crazy. Did you look back in the other wars? Did it happen then as well? Did someone give an issue? So I get, that's why I would say,
yes, right. Like that's a relevant question, and that's how it was answered. Like, it was compared to previous wars.
right.
And this level, they say, is very much out of the ordinary.
Should we factor in for also this event is out of the ordinary? Like a massacre and people coming
Sure,
in?
we should factor it in, but like, you ask a question, right? You said compare it to other wars. Okay, I compared it to other wars. And I would say, oh, maybe you shouldn't.
Correct. You're correct, because there's many factors, and on all the levels. And you know what? The news spoke about it. Great. Why did you talk about it 7 times? Why did you push it so, like, all these things matter? And then what's the agenda that this is being pushed? Which is it bad leadership in the army? Is it the soldiers are bad? Obviously, Sagil will come and say, like, no, this has to do with other reasons. This has to do with, 1, the ethics situation, 2, the fact that we went into this army already divided. All those things could be true. To me, it's very difficult to and if I'm wrong, then I'll be more depressed, right? Which is like why I sent you that other video of, like, it looks like what they're showing is that that's actually not true. So if I saw right now a video, if I saw information which says, listen, in reality, in this war, there was a tremendous amount of unethical things going on, I would be like, that's horrible. We've hit a new low. There's rot. I can understand why people are doing this because they're very angry, but it's no excuse, XYZ. My worry is that there's a sense where, like, sort of like we, even now, we need to focus and to see where, like, are we focusing on this and turning this into something that it's not? Or you could be like, well, I'm worried that it will turn into something, and we have to be vigilant to make sure and quickly change our course before it becomes too late. So I could be with you there, where it's like we have to do something because we're not going the right direction. I currently, with the information I have, refuse to believe that we're at this point, that this immoral army that is completely unraveling, and we have no more ethics. Like, I don't.
I'll try to maybe the framing is important here. Like what my framing is. I think there is certainly a part of Israeli society, everywhere in the army, outside the army, that is obsessed with their agenda to the degree that they are willing to cut the baby in half if they can't have it, right? To quote, to reference Solomon's Shrine. Yeah. And what I'm worried about when I look at these things, the thing that this brings up for me is that sense that the level, the degree to which they should have, let's say, prevalence in order to have a massive outsized influence is not that high. Right? When you let the fanatics have their way,
Like a Ben,
they don't have to have even close to a majority to have a dramatic impact on where society goes.
I mean, so your argument would be, in a certain sense, is that, like, look, the data point of Ben Gvir and Smotrich should be like a yelling indication of, like, you know what, like, Chazi, there you are, you're almost at the cliff, because two of the nincompoops have reached their level of provenance, right? And we've already discussed that, like, it's also the left's fault for allowing them to get to that kind of power by political.
I'll just say on that sense, right? I take all the blame that I can take, right? That's my instinct. But, like, just as a point of let's say aggravation that I always feel like yeah, I can't avoid but feel that blame, but I do feel like that should be on the conscience of anyone from the right.
Vadai.
100-fold. Like, how the hell? Yes. Mine is a sin of omission. I didn't do enough, right? But the right wing, that's a sin of commission.
Yeah, obviously within the right, you also have people that were against it. My point would be that this is it's also your quote unquote blame is spread out over many, many years, where here it's more specific because, I felt like, Bibi ultimately is pushed to this, and extremists become this has to do with like a pendulum, basically, like this kind of character is being, over the years, is just slowly but surely becoming more and more robust. And ultimately, one day, Bibi finds himself with being like, this is now the guy I need to partner up with. But yes, the right should definitely be definitely wins the award. Okay, for Ben Gvir. My point is that you're telling me, Chazi, look, well, like that coupled with, right? You're gonna say, like, there's a guy named Ben Gvir, and the problematic statements in the Hague we're talking about, most of the problematic statements are coming from like people like that. If we were just dealing with a Herzog, that's fine. You could be like, it's a bad day. He was angry. He was talking passionately. But here I could see like multiple people within this group are being the problematic ones. And then I could tell you that coupled with the values in the army, and the fact that we're dealing with like these kind of things on the ground right now, right? I'm asking these officers, and they're saying what Ben Gvir is thinking, right? There you could say, I could tell you, like, there's an indication why I'm worried, right? Like, why I'm.
Look, to quote what Jacob said just earlier in the comments, right? He's the guy who had a picture of a terrorist that killed 32, I think, Muslims praying in the Cave of the Patriarchs in his living room, right? We are talking full-blown terrorist mindset, right? Like he considers that something worthy of praise, right? To go into a place of worship and massacre people. He considers that worthy of praise. That is a terrorist mindset.
By the way, I'm just remembering now, when I mentioned the Yasser Arafat thing, I didn't mean Yasser Arafat. I meant that Ahmad Tibi has a picture of Yasser Arafat in his house. That's now I'm just remembering when you told me the story. My point is, like, there was like another problematic figure, but either way, it just reminded me of that. Yes, right. So like, okay, so we could start from that. We could say, like, here we have a terrorist, right? Then we have a guy that has a picture, a fan of him. Clearly, this guy gets has now 14 mandates, and now you want to needle to thread, officer in army says very devastating line, right, which correlates all the way back to Baruch Goldstein, right? That kind of mindset I have.
While a devastating and like massively forceful war is being fought. Like, this isn't in a vacuum in status quo situations. Like, we are faced with the most challenging situation morally that we could ever face, right? And in this time, we have these forces pushing us over the edge at every point that they can.
These forces being what, like the Ben-Gvirs?
Yeah. The Ben-Gvirs and like they're not just up top, like they're in every layer of society. So this is for them, and they've spoken this way very clearly in many occasions, right? They're not happy about the massacre. They're not happy about like having all of the hostages. But, and this is their words, not me saying that, they say, we're not happy about all these things, but finally we get to level up. We get to be the people we wanted to be by taking Gaza, by taking Lebanon now, these are the sorts of things that the people around these circles are talking about. And like, I'm talking like on uniform officers saying these things.
But this is also the difference between, he also mentions, like, Sagi was talking about that we have to have a separation between the army and the civilians, but he also then says, like, but the people are the army, right? Like, you have all these people, like, it really is the people's army. So these guys are home for years and years and years, right? Or like I'm saying, our politicians are soldiers, right? Like, you have Yoav Zentel in the army fighting, right? And then he goes back to do policy, but he was just shot at 2 days ago by someone, right? So that's just like a reality on the ground. So my only point is, we have to also take into consideration that this officer is also individual father, brother, mother, cousin, real life, right? This isn't soldier, 22-year-old, necessarily no life, siloed, and just had been in the army for 7 years, and he is a professional soldier, right? This is really father that I took out of his office, made him soldier now again. And I took secular guy, I took Ethiopian guy, I took religious guy, right? And one of them is saying, like, and they have different mindsets, right? Like, you're saying, like, these values that they're bringing in, or these stuff that they're doing. So I would say, looking at it, saying, like, these are soldiers saying it. Again, I think it's different than saying, let's say, I want to say it's not really fair to categorize them just as soldiers, because I was a civilian until a second ago, and many people on October 7th literally fighting in their boxers, right? Like, so you can't have more of an image of like being like someone being like, oh, but he's a soldier now. I'm a soldier now. I'm running in flip-flops. Someone was just murdering my family, and I was like fighting with a soldier. I was fighting with like a ridiculous gun that I took from him. So like, I don't know if it's fair to look at that soldier and be like, you're not being professional right now. Does that make sense? I'm not saying it's like an excuse. My point is, like you're saying, like, you're in it. right? Where you're talking to the soldier, and like it's as real as it gets, which is like you're grabbing uh your
So you said, let me just grab onto that. You're saying, well, that soldier, it's not. There's a bit of an issue there. That soldier, we took, a settler guy. We took an Ethiopian
Yeah.
guy. We took a secular guy, right? And now they're together, fighting this war. Now, I think we all agree, and like it was never any real issue, and any army commander says that very clearly. If you're in your platoon, you don't talk, before October 7th, after October 7th, you don't talk about what you think about the judicial reform, right? You don't
Yep.
talk about that. Like, there's a good reason why you don't talk about that. Like, it's a contentious issue, and sure, you don't like put gags on people's mouth, but I think it was your cousin. You
You don't
said,
politicize the army.
your cousin started that army in his own interview. He said when people start, flapping their gums, something is telling to just shut up now, because they're not gonna get. Because if you keep flapping your gums, we're not gonna get home safely. Right? To me, that separation, right? When I say professionalism, this isn't like an empty concept that I'm saying a soldier should be like this. I'm saying, right, when that officer is saying we need to resettle Gaza, and you have all of the people that think that would be, right, a disaster. This is not like policy that needs to be decided. Definitely not at the officer level,
Right.
Then you're inflaming all of those wounds. And to me, like I said, the indication, the thing I see, what I read into that is that fanaticism that says, well, we are so right about what we're saying that it doesn't matter that this would endanger us. It would create conflict within our units. It would create strife. We are so right about this that we should just, say it, and God will help us through this, and then we should just follow our divine path. Like that's why when I see these videos, when I see this situation, I'm saying, like, this is a part of the forces, like I said, that are fanatical enough, and enough historical examples have showed how outsized their effect can be. Because, like, if everyone else, and this is the exact exploitation that I'm afraid of, if everyone else is saying, like, you know what, I'm not going to even contest that, right? I don't want to open this subject because I want to get home safely. But they're going, like, it's important enough, right? I can just flout whatever I think because my worldview, my divine calling is important enough to flaunt all those laws. Then, like, you're going to lose, regardless of how much more people you have, how much more powerful how you are, because they're willing for the baby to be cut in two. That's what I'm pointing to.
Well, I would argue they don't see it as cutting the baby in two. They see it as like, this is the only way we keep the whole baby. Is if this is our. They could be mistaken, of course, but I don't think they look about it as like either this or all, like either all or nothing.
Let's say I don't really. I'm not really trying to psychoanalyze them and say exactly, like, sure, I could try to be in their shoes and see how they, to their eyes, that doesn't seem the case. But the way I would see, like, the baby being the state of Israel, having an existence where we can actually be a normal, like you could say liberal, but I don't know how much charge that word has. let's say, a reasonable, sane country living, without October 7th reoccurring every now and then,
Yeah.
right? I think if we put that, and they would say, like, okay, you could have that, but you'd have to give up on the
But I think
dream of
most of most of the,
whatever fanatical messianic dream you have. They would say, like, no, like this.
I disagree. I mean, in the circles I'm in, and obviously I'm not in the.
I'm not talking about your circles, probably, right? You
I,
don't hang out with Ben-Gvirists.
That's true. That's true. And this goes back to your say. Okay, so I would say that it's a minority, and you'd say that doesn't matter because they are represented. Like you said, their amount of power is much greater. And to that, I have to concede. I don't have an answer for that. Like where like that could be a problem. My argument would be that saner minds will prevail. Now you could tell me like, well, that's not the case.
If they are strict enough, only if we understand that one Jewish terrorist is worse than 100 enemy terrorists.
But we know that because that's why we rip into ourselves like so much more when we hear these kind of things. We do. We talk about it. It becomes the news.
We do. Our government no longer does. Our government says, and this isn't even new. Like I said, the fact that the Jewish underground was pardoned within like 3 years of their sentence, when they literally have blood on their hands and they were caught red-handed.
Yeah, I know you. But again, you're using example, right?
The Jewish underground. I mean, what better? Like, what more do you want? They were a clear terrorist organization. They were connected to power.
You are right, but I can also give you examples of Israeli citizens that were stripped from their rights and were sitting in jail or in isolation, and people beat them. Also, like I'm saying, on another extreme, like people, like there are people in jail right now for Jewish terrorism.
Okay, there are probably, like, as I'm saying, the amount of people in jail, from everything I've managed to gather, right? The amount of people in jail compared to the amount of people that should have been, is not enough, right? Like, this isn't a strong enough crackdown. And
by the way, I'll tell you more of that. Sure, no problem. It is not a prevalent issue in Israel, though. Most of the society isn't going around beating up Arabs. Most of the people aren't doing Jewish terror. Whoever is doing it is wrong. They should be arrested, and the army needs to crack down on more. It is not the problem of this country. It is not what's keeping.
If Baruch Goldstein could have changed the course of history without it being a problem in Israel, that is the sort of mindset we should have. I'm not saying all Israelis are like that, and I think that's where that's where we're constantly clashing. You're telling me, show me the scale of the phenomenon that is big enough to be concerned about, and I'm saying, what we see with very, mild assumptions is way too big already. Not like that. I think that's where we differ, because I never said the majority of Israelis are insane.
But I would say that the majority of Israelis would drop their weapons tomorrow if you brought back the captives and you wanted real peace. That's the headline. The headline is we want peace. Today, next second. That's it. Even if you say you're attacking,
they won't let it happen, right? What? Like that. But the people from those extremes, right? The people like Baruch Goldstein.
We're keeping away the peace.
The people like Baruch Goldstein are keeping away the peace, for one.
He is far and few between, but there's been way more powerful people than him that tried to create peace. Whether it's the actual peace deals that were on the table, right? Like insane deals, like here's 98% of this, or here, take that. Those people, and the people themselves that were massacred, that went into Gaza, the people that living in these periphery places, that gave them food, that met with them, that tried to do peace. We are a people of peace. We want peace. And guess what? To anyone that's watching that thinks we talk about the Amalekites, Maimonides even says, even to the Amalekites, you first have to go and reach out for peace. Peace for everyone. That's what he wants, and that's the headline. So that's why it's so crazy when you go to Hague, because it's so inverted, because we just want peace, because we've made peace with the other people before. So even if right now you could say the way we're attacking and the way we're behaving in some cases is overboard or not ethical, even that is all happening under the rubric of like, we much prefer peace. Our narrative is peace. We are not a war-hungry people.
Look, I'm absolutely with you, right? We want peace. I agree, right? Like the thing is,
even Ben-Gvir, 1 second. Even Ben-Gvir, I would agree with you saying he wants historic Israel, and he's willing to, he's okay with people dying to get it. All that's true, but he too wants peace.
He wants domination. I mean, he wants peace in the extent
Does he want to dominate? I have a question, dude. Does he
wants peace in the extent that Russia wants peace, right?
Does he want to take over Iran?
He wants to get his way. Let's say all of historic Israel, with everything that includes.
But let's say he did. Let's say he got it. Let's say he got whatever he wanted. He got historic Israel.
So that's limited imperialism, right? Sure. It's still imperialism.
Would he have problems, though, right now? Would he have problems dealing with Arab countries, having peace with them, giving them technology, sharing things with them, helping them succeed? I would disagree.
I mean, he would probably give something like Efraim Herrera's claim that they're always going to be enemies, and because they're Muslim countries, you know, the Quran and Taqiyya and everything you want. And like at the end of the day, I don't think he would want to have anything more than he has to with those countries, and basically to live on the sword. Like, and I don't know why we're having this discussion. He's a terrorist, right? Like, I mean, he's convicted of that. Why does it matter that Ben-Gvir doesn't?
Do you think the Likud party wants that? Do you think Raviv Levine wants that? Do you think Bibi wants that? Do you think that? Sorry, the right in this.
My view of the Likud party, right? Like right now, you have Bibi and you have a bunch of useless placeholders that have no opinions or skills except to kiss his ass. So to say whether they want or don't want something seems like misattributing agency, right?
Does Bibi want? Does Bennett want?
Bennett probably does, though I have a lot of other problems with Bennett. Bibi, I don't think his. I won't go into what I think about Bibi. I think
sure. Let's remove him.
He might want peace for his name to be written on it. I don't think he has much like non-egocentric concerns.
Assuming he would prefer his son not fall downstairs, right? I'm assuming he could have some empathy. He's not a robot at the end of the day. Or he's saying he's too far removed. Even that. How can I spin that for a headline to get elected again? My son was wounded.
Look, first of all, if we're talking about his son, right, and all of the issues there, that's a whole different rabbit hole, and I have no idea how much like contention there is in that family, and how much of that is so rotten to the core. But
I'll tell you what it is. And maybe this is like, and we could obviously continue this again. But when I hear that celebrity, that movie actor, Idan Ahmadi, come and say when he finishes his sentence with Am Yisrael Chai, and it was devastating. Whoever doesn't know, Israel lost like 21 soldiers in one day unfortunately due to an accident that happened. Regardless, the funeral, the location where the soldiers are buried was completely overpacked. It was also raining, and they had to ask people to leave because a new funeral procession is coming in. But the mother was speaking over there, and she got up and she called out 3 times, Am Yisrael Chai, which is the nation of Israel is alive. That I am proud of I'm not saying you're not. I am proud of my country. I think we should be proud of ourselves, of who we are and what could we be, and we should be achieving for the greatest and not being saying like, oh, we're already great. So when I hear like the Shut Up campaign, it's because all I hear is doubt into our country, and that doesn't mean, like I said, and I know you know this, but it's important for me to reiterate, like where we make mistakes, we are allowed to shine a flashlight on that and root it out because we don't want that. But the sense is of like we need to be embarrassed in ourselves and we need to be ashamed and we have to be like in one more minute we're no better than them. No, we are better than the people that are attacked us, and we're very different than the people that attacked us. And we like I see us as a people that is, and it's obviously very difficult. The whole nation is dealing with this issue. It's not like there's an army and there's one government guy that's doing this. The people that are fighting right now against humanitarian aid going in, they're not evil people. They're not evil people. They're dealt with a horrible scenario where they're saying, how could we be doing this? How could we be allowing in this humanitarian aid? And ironically, like, again, like our old prime minister has to lie to the people and still do it because he recognizes how convoluted this situation is. So when you send me a podcast like that, to me, I hear like, you're looking depressed or you're looking down, and I want to look and be like, no, like raise your chin up, like we are eternal, we are phenomenal, we are fighting. And that goes back to like the Phoenix Rising. Like I don't think we've risen yet, and part of rising is being able to really fully, like you said, shed off all that garbage. And part of that berur, it's even a sense in Kabbalistic teaching, like part of that extraction of trying to see where the right is and the discernment. I mean, I think from a social level, from a political level, from a religious level, all that's happening right now, and it's painful and it's uncomfortable. But if only for the sake of to be a counter to say like, well, it's not horrible, Gilad. Like we have what to be proud of. Even if how we're acting in this war, like I do think we also have what to be proud of.
Sure. I think there's a lot to be proud of. I think going back to October 6th, right?
Less to be proud of that.
We have a lot to be embarrassed about.
Yes. Right? I mean, I would argue, I mean, in a certain way, right? Like this is, I mean, it's again, like what I said, it's biblical in scale. It's almost poetic that we have to be dealing with this kind of thing because like I said earlier with like the prophets, like we're back into that cycle again where like if we don't learn, we'll end this to do this again. So there obviously October 6th is still looming, and the 9 months, leading up to that, which is like, are we going to learn our lesson emerging out of this army, out of this war, which is on multiple levels, not giving the extreme, not elevating the extremists within us, seeing each other for who we are, right? Like, like if we could see, if we're fighting about the humanity and the humanitarian aid to the clear enemy, how could we not see each other, right? In this divide, and we're clearly brothers. I'm sad. Yeah.
I mean, I get it, and it's rough. I'm just saying, when I say we have a lot to be embarrassed about, I say it from a point where I look at us, and we're not an African country that just had a coup by some military supported by the Wagner force and basically tribes killing each other, right? In that case, we would be, if we compared ourselves to whatever ridiculous comparison, then sure, I could say we're better than that. But I think again, like there's a lot to point to and to be embarrassed about. There's a lot of ways in which we have been deluded, self-deceived, and and torn away from sanity. I think, like I said, to sum it up, we've become obsessed with appearances, as if marketing would make everything look like the commercial in real life. And behind the scenes, things were falling apart, and that was my sense for those 9 months. That's to me the bigger war that had happened, right? Because it's not about policy, right? It's about sanity, and the way I see this even now, right? I don't think, still, with all of the terrible things that we do see, I still don't think there is any army in the world right now that can claim moral high ground over the IDF in the way that it operates. I think even professionally, definitely October 7th was a devastating failure, but the combined ground maneuvers, I've heard many people discuss that this is something that would probably be studied by other armies in terms of warfare in urban areas. Like, there are a lot of things where there is a really an incredible wealth and incredible goodness that's there, and should not be ignored. My sense is that a lot of the shouting, a lot of the you said, how many times do you point at this? How many times do you mention this terrible thing, or the negative stuff? Comes from the sense that there's a tremendous force trying to just sweep everything under the rug. So, like, there's, I think, a lot of sort of cleansing of that air that needs to happen if we are to move forward. And
I agree. I mean, and like a lot of the institutions, like I said, we don't have to burn them down, of course, but like there for sure has to be like a cleansing. And like as far as like, I think it's nonsense that the army was talking about like we're going to do our own internal like investigation. Like f that. Like obviously, I want like an external investigation of what happened over there. Like we can't walk around being like, I trust you guys for like you guys checked it out and said everything's okay. Like there needs to be a cleansing on multiple levels, I guess.
I mean, like, specifically about the army, we can talk about like the specifics, because it was a limited operational investigation, but it doesn't really matter.
It came off when the Ramatkal, the chief of the army, when the head of the army was talking about it, as if like we're going to do this and like that should be suffice. I'm like,
okay. I mean, my impression was, right, like there's a lot of marketing around it, but my impression was like this. Never mind. I don't think it matters enough.
When you look at comments, as they say, I don't have like a YouTube following, but like, or a Twitter following, or Twitter at all. But they say when you look at comments, right, you could have like 1,000 good comments, and like the one negative comment is like the one that gnaws on you, right? So the sense would be, even as a country, like, are you going to drive yourself crazy, right? Like the bad comment you get, that becomes the focus of the news. And I want to split that to two different directions. You could say, listen, Khadi, even one comment, if it's indicative of a bigger issue, or if it's a serious issue, you can't just ignore it and be like, well, it's one comment. Look at all the 1,000 people that say you're great, but ignore the fact that they pointed out that you're smuggling, whatever. Like, that's obviously an issue. Yes, that needs to be focused on. Another point of that campaign of shut your mouth, which, let's say, speaking to, let's say, the politicians or speaking to, let's say, the media, you have mothers, you have children, you have students. You have to also take into consideration how this affects the country. So you coming out and focusing on the bad comment is weakening your society structure, right? Like if you have like mothers now and all these women or all these partners or businesses that are still trying to keep afloat, even though half of the population is fighting a war right now, and their attitude is like they're fighting a population, but they're all fighting like murderers and they're assholes, and we're not moral. Like, what does that do to a whole people? And now you could be like, well, if that's the case, they need to face up with it. Like, I don't even know if that's necessarily the case. Like, do you just recklessly smear like everyone and have to then deal with like what's the fallout of that? Like, do you have like women right now, like whole populations having nervous breakdowns because they feel like this war is for nothing? Like we have to be sensitive with that also. And again, I'm not trying to avoid criticism, but you have to be sensitive. Like, what are the dynamics on the ground? Like, are you going to be telling people like, let your businesses fail? None of you guys, like, you're going to come home to businesses that don't work anymore. You have to fire your employees. You have to have businesses fall, and tell someone, like, if someone has in his mind, we're doing this now because we're going to stop Hamas, and then the news is saying at the same time, like, we really shouldn't be stopping them. We have to understand them. In the end, they're still a partner. And someone could be like, even if that's true from a policy level, recognize what that does to the people, what that does to the soldiers. So, like, I'm also saying that we have to be very sensitive to how we're also speaking about the war during war, when everyone has their phone and everyone has a message and everyone is hearing this. And we don't really have the tools to deal with that, because this is the first time we're having a war in 2024 that media and social media and the internet. So like it's a dynamic that you're also not dealing with, which is in earlier wars, more things were put under the rug and no one even knew about it. Later on, we know, guess what? Deir Yassin, there was a massacre. Here, there was a massacre. There was a massacre. But there was a narrative that allowed a country to be built. And you could be like, that's a false narrative. I always joke about this. If we had social media, you would have found a picture of Gandhi eating, right? Or we would have known that really earlier Martin Luther King was beating his wife. Would it have been worth it to know if that would have knocked down Martin Luther King? If I told you that news and then he's no longer a hero, was it a net positive? Should I keep on hiding that news? Should I have not told anyone?
So I think there's, definitely in the Jewish framework, the conflict between truth and peace is a very widely spoken conflict.
Kalana ave chasuda, right? What we tell about the bride. The bride, what Gilad is referencing is, there's a famous story of like, can you lie? And the answer is, of course you can lie. And then we say a beautiful, a blessing. We tell the bride that she's beautiful. What if she's ugly? And you say, no, nevertheless, you still say she's beautiful, and this is called like a white lie. If your wife asks, do these jeans look good on me? You don't say no. You say, you look beautiful, honey. Right? So like, this is on a much larger scale.
So I'm saying, I know that this is a conflict within Judaism, and even Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel in that conflict. It said that Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim, or is that something else? But in any case, they're both valid, and Bet Hillel is chosen because they are the more modest requirement. Aluvin, I think, is the word they use. But my point is, I think that when you when you think about the like that conflict, it can never be one where you say, well, okay, we don't need truth. And how do you?
I'm not saying we don't need truth.
Yeah, but that's what I'm pointing to, right? That I'm not saying we don't need peace or that we don't need, and I mean peace not in the state sense. I mean, right, the necessity for internal harmony uh, in the face of truth that could be disruptive. I'm saying that, right, in a world where truth prevails, for instance, let's say if you talked about Martin Luther King and we knew that he was beating his wife, well, in a world where truth prevails, then maybe he doesn't get to a point where he beats his wife, right? Maybe he doesn't get to a point if he knows that the truth comes out and that he doesn't get away with this. Maybe he becomes a better person, right? I don't know what happens in that world.
I mean, maybe there isn't a world like that where said en sadik shelo yachta, right? There isn't a man that's not going to sin. And do we live in a world where we have like it's like the cancel issue? Like 10 years ago, you said X. By the way, the extreme would be Ben Gvir. It doesn't work over here, but you could say even Ben Gvir, right? Can't a man repent? Right? He removed the picture of Baruch Goldstein. Now you could say like, well, his rhetoric shows that he clearly is still in the same show. My point being, like when are you allowed to be like, yeah, I made a mistake. I have mistakes. I never claimed to be perfect. Why am I being looked at with like, but you made a mistake here. You made a mistake there. Okay. Yeah. I make mistakes.
Well, I do want to focus back on the issue of media and what do you like?
Sure.
We need to wrap up. That I'm just trying to say that to me, the pressing issue is I find it more important for, in this case, as an example, for the government's inaction and ineptitude to be resolved. In truth, I think is like maybe not a great tool, but it's the best tool we have to solve it. Than to know that more lives are being lost and more of our achievements are being thrown away because of just complete lack of policy in terms of what the hell happens after the army does its job. Right? The fact that
I agree. You mean the day after?
Yeah,
I mean
the government doesn't have a plan, basically, right? Means that, right? And you're saying, how can you say that to the soldiers fighting there that they're fighting for nothing? Because if the government doesn't, like, this is the basics of any, like, political thought. If war doesn't serve political means, then you're throwing lives on both sides for nothing.
You are right. You're right. My point would be, and this we said many times, and we'll end on this, but like how the message is put across, what words, what terms are you using? I think, and our politicians, our news anchors, us as individuals could all do a better job in communication, in conversation. Obviously, even in this conversation right now, like if this was happening on the news, we'd obviously be in a better place if people were conversing like this. I mean, it doesn't happen in sound bites. It doesn't even happen, unfortunately, in podcasts. I mean, it does happen there more often, but our search continues.
Yeah.
We'll catch up by the next week or two. We'll keep on schmoozing.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone watching, I hope all's well. I hope you guys found it beneficial. Pray for Israel. Pray for all the innocent Palestinian wounded as well. Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What a good dude. Gilad. Does anyone want to jump on for a second? to share a thought, anyone watching that felt compelled to say something, you are welcome to join. Mm. Too tired to join tonight. Appreciate the conversation. Thank you, Nechama. I hope you're doing well too. Hope the family's safe. And I appreciated your few but poignant comments. Much appreciated. I hope you have a productive week and a restful sleep. Oh. Thanks, dude. Thanks, Ethan. Much appreciated. All right. I'll catch you guys on the flip.